Hi everyone, today we'll be looking at algebra as a whole, just why we use it and what some key ideas in algebra are. This is meant purely as an introduction, okay? There are just some key ideas here to note. The first one being what algebra is. It's the way that we write in maths, okay? It's just another way to write problems out, another way to kind of generalize things, so it makes it easier to apply a lot of different numbers, okay? For example, if we want 2 times any number, we might say something like 2n, okay? That's just one example. A variable, which is also called a pronumeral, is a number that changes, okay? So we call it a variable because it varies. This is usually represented, or almost always represented, by a letter, okay? So some examples of letters you'll come across are things like X, Y, and Z, and things like A, B, and C are the more common ones. And the reason for that is because we don't use them a lot for other things in maths. So we try to stay away from letters like M because we use that for things like meters. Moving on to a term, this is a combination, okay, of a variable and a number. So a combination of a variable and a number. And they are always combined with multiplication or division, okay? So some example of a term would be something like 4x, maybe 3ab. And if we had division, we would write that using a fraction. We'd have like n over 7, for example. So these are all terms. If we have something like 1x, we write that out as x. We forget about the 1, okay? So they're all examples of a term. Now, a constant term is just a number, okay? This doesn't vary. It's just whatever number is written there, okay? So a constant term might be something like 5, and we know that that's just 5. That's what it is. You can have negative constants, you can have fraction constants, as long as there is no variable there, okay? Then we have an algebraic expression. This is a combination of terms, and these terms are always separated by a plus or a minus, okay? So a combination of terms separated by a plus or a minus, and there is no equal sign in an expression, okay? So an expression is just going to be one bit. That's a combination of different terms that can be separated by a plus or a minus. So if I combine some of our terms from up there before, this here would be an expression, okay? Lastly, we've got a coefficient. This is the number out the front of a variable, okay? So there's the number in front of a variable. And just as a heads up, we do not write the number 1. Okay, so in the examples we had a 4x, and I'm going to give you like a negative 5ab, and then we'll do x, okay? Our coefficients here are 4, negative 5, and then 1, which we do not write, okay? So we've got 4x has a coefficient of 4, negative 5ab has a coefficient of negative 5, and x just has a coefficient of 1. Now I'm going to pause the video here, you're going to pause the video and have a go at filling in these blanks, and then unpause when you're ready to go. For this one here, I'm going to start off big and then move down small, okay? That big box encapsulating everything, we call this an equation because it has an equal sign, but we're going to be delving into that a little bit more in later videos. If I then go to that second biggest box, being that dashed line to the left, that's showing me 45x squared minus 7x plus 2, and that is an expression. Okay, so an expression being a combination of different terms separated by those pluses and minuses. That next box down to the left, I have negative 7x. That's a combination of a variable and a coefficient, so it's a term with the coefficient of x being negative 7. Moving on to the number 9 there, that there is your coefficient because it's out the front of your x. That negative 52 on the end is the constant term because it's just a number. So constant term. And then that x is your variable or your pronumeral. You do need to get used to seeing both those words being used. Okay. For this example here, once again, pause the video and then I will go through it once you unpause. Looking here, we've got our expression 4x minus 3y plus 24z plus 7. If we're looking for how many terms there are, we're just seeing how many things are separated by a plus or a minus. So I've got 4x, negative 3y, 24z, and 7. So there are 4 terms. Writing those out, I have 4x, I have negative 3y, you have to bring that negative with you. I have 24z and 7. So even though 7 is a constant, it's still a constant term, so it counts. The coefficient of y, once again, remembering that we're going to take that negative with us. So the answer for that one is negative 3. And then which variable has a coefficient of 24? We're looking for the letter that goes with 24, and that is z. Okay? Now our last little bit for today, we're going to be looking at how we write expressions using variables. Okay? So usually when it comes to algebra, we like to just shortcut things and we like to make things really short and sweet. Okay? So if we're looking at addition, we'll be using an addition sign, so the plus sign. Okay? And the order doesn't really matter when it comes to addition because something like 5 plus 3 is the same as 3 plus 5. Okay? So for example, 5 more than a number, because we don't know what that number is, I'm going to make it the letter n. Okay? So 5 more means I've got n and I'm adding on 5. Okay? For subtraction, we're going to use a minus sign. Now be careful here because the order does matter. Okay? Something like 7 minus 4 is not the same as 4 minus 7. Okay? I've got 7 less than m, so I'm going to be starting with m and subtracting 7. Okay? Then for multiplication, write it out using a multiplication sign and then forget about the multiplication sign. Okay? So in algebra, you can write it out with the multiplication sign to start with, but then after that you have to get used to getting rid of it. So the word product does mean times. So I'm going to do 3 times x times y, and I'm going to forget about those multiplication signs. That's equal to 3xy. Then for division, we use fractions. Okay, I know a lot of us can be averse to using fractions, but you do just have to use them. If I've got p is halved, there's 2 ways I can write this. I can say half of p, or I can take p and divide it by 2 and write that as p over 2. Okay, now it's your turn. Have a go at some of these, pause the video, and I will go through them. Looking at this first one, we've got the sum of a and b. We know that sum just means plus, so I've got a plus b. Okay, then I've got x divided by 4. That has to be a fraction, would be x over 4. We're then going to move over to these ones on the right. They're a little bit easier. We've got triple the value of k. That's 3 times k, and we get rid of that multiplication, gives me 3k. Then we've got 3 less than double n. This is where you do have to watch your BODMAS and make sure that you are following the right steps. I'm going to start with doubling n, which is 2 times n, and then I'm going to subtract 3 from that because it's 3 less. I'm then going to get rid of my multiplication sign, will give me 2n minus 3. For this fifth one here, we've got p is halved. We did that above, that's p over 2, and then we're going to add on 4. So the 4 gets added on outside of the fraction. For the next one, I've got the sum of x and y is taken. So that's going to be x plus y, and then all of that is divided by 8. So all of that goes on a fraction over 8. Then lastly, we've got x is added to 1/7 of y. I've got 1/7 of y plus x, or we can write that as y over 7 plus x. And then last but not least, we've got 5 subtracted from k, and the result is tripled. Okay, so this one's a bit of a trickier one. I'm going to have k minus 5, and if I want to triple this whole thing, I'm going to be using my brackets. So 3 times that, which is equal to 3k minus 5.